The Huey's rotor blades beat the humid air into submission as First Lieutenant Robin Bartlett pressed his back against the vibrating aluminum skin. 28 men, his men, crammed into 6 helicopters, screaming toward a landing zone somewhere in the green hell of I-Corps, Vietnam. He was 22 years old. Through the open door, the jungle canopy rushed beneath them, an endless carpet of triple canopy green broken only by bomb craters and the snaking brown ribbons of trails. Bartlett's hand tightened on his M16. In 7 minutes, those doors would be wide open and his platoon would pour out into whatever waited below. Intelligence said enemy movement in the area. Intelligence always said enemy movement. What intelligence never told you was whether you'd be walking into a green LZ or a hot one, whether you'd step onto solid ground or into a wall of AK-47 fire. He glanced at the faces around him, specialists and privates, most of them 18 or 19 years old. Some dozed despite the engine roar. Others stared at nothing, lost in thoughts about home or girlfriends or simply making it through the next few hours. A few checked their weapons for the dozenth time, fingers working magazines and charging handles with the automatic movements of nervous energy. This was First Platoon, Alpha Company, 1st of the 5th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division Airmobile. The unit had more helicopter support than any other division in Vietnam. They could deploy into combat at a moment's notice, hit hard, and extract just as fast. It was the future of warfare, they said. Airmobile assault, vertical envelopment. It was also the fastest way to get killed. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. Bartlett felt his stomach tighten. Not fear exactly, more like the electric anticipation before a high school football game, but amplified 1,000-fold and mixed with the cold knowledge that people might die in the next few minutes, that he might give an order that would get one of his men killed. He'd arrived in country just weeks ago, straight from the repo depot in Long Binh, where all prior orders had been cancelled. The Tet offensive in January had chewed through officers at a horrific rate. Now it was May 1968, arguably the worst time to be a platoon leader in Vietnam. The brass needed bodies with bars on their collars, and they needed them now. Bartlett had volunteered for all of it. Infantry, airborne, ranger school, assignment to the 82nd Airborne Division. He'd gotten everything he asked for and more, much more. 3 fingers. The door gunners swiveled their M60s, scanning the approaching LZ. Bartlett could see it now, a clearing in the jungle, brown earth showing through elephant grass. No smoke, no tracers arcing up. Maybe it would be green after all. The pilot flared hard, nose up, and the Huey dropped like a stone. Bartlett's stomach lurched. Through the door he saw the other birds in formation, dropping in perfect sequence. Then the skids hit earth with a jarring thud, and the crew chief was screaming, "Go, go, go!" Bartlett jumped, boots hitting the ground hard. He went to one knee, weapon up, scanning his sector. His men poured out behind him, spreading into a defensive perimeter exactly as trained. The other helicopters were touching down, disgorging soldiers, and then pulling pitch and climbing away in a hurricane of rotor wash and flying debris. Then silence. Not real silence. Never real silence in the jungle, but the absence of gunfire. The LZ was green. Bartlett exhaled and keyed his radio. "Foggy day 6? This is foggy day 16. First platoon on the ground. LZ secure. Moving to phase line blue." The company commander's voice crackled back acknowledgement. 2nd and 3rd platoons were forming up. The mission was simple on paper. Move west through the jungle, search a suspected enemy area, find the bad guys if they were there, kill them if contact was made, extract by helicopter before nightfall, search and destroy. The core mission of the infantry in Vietnam. Bartlett studied his map, checked his compass, and gave the signal. First platoon moved into the jungle. Within 50 meters, the temperature climbed 20 degrees. The triple canopy blocked out the sun but trapped the heat and humidity like a greenhouse. Sweat soaked through Bartlett's fatigues. Around him, his men moved in staggered column, weapons ready, eyes scanning the green walls that pressed in from all sides. The point man, a specialist named Rodriguez, moved carefully, looking for tripwires. disturbed earth, any sign of booby traps or enemy presence. Behind him walked the slack man, covering Rodriguez's back. Then came Bartlett with his RTO, a kid from Ohio named Miller, who carried the PRC-25 radio that connected First Platoon to the company and the world. They humped for 2 hours, covering maybe a click and a half. In the jungle, speed meant noise, and noise meant death. They moved slowly, deliberately, stopping every few minutes to listen. That's when the first shot cracked out, a single round, impossibly loud in the jungle stillness. Then a burst of automatic fire, AK-47s, the distinctive pop, pop, pop that every grunt learned to recognize instantly. "Contact front!" Rodriguez's voice carried back down the line. Bartlett dropped to one knee. "First squad, online. Second squad, move right. Third squad, left flank." His men reacted instantly, muscle memory from countless training exercises taking over. Within seconds, First Platoon had formed a skirmish line, every weapon oriented toward the source of fire. More shots, M16s now, answering back. The firefight built in intensity, individual shots merging into a continuous roar. "Up!" Bartlett shouted, and First Squad bounded forward 10 meters, while the others provided covering fire. "Down! Second squad! Up!" They advanced by leapfrog, one element moving while the others suppressed the enemy position. Bartlett moved with them, trying to see through the jungle, trying to understand what they were facing. How many enemy? What kind of position? Bunkers? Fighting holes, or just a small unit caught in the open? His RTO stayed glued to his side. "Foggy Day 6 wants a sitrep," Miller said, voice tight. "Tell him contact. Unknown enemy strength advancing to close," Bartlett said. He keyed his own handset. "Foggy Day Romeo, this is 1-6. Fire mission. Will adjust." The forward observer, a lieutenant named Patterson, came up on the net immediately. "Artillery." If this turned into a real fight, Bartlett wanted steel on target. The firefight intensified. Bartlett could hear the distinctive crack of rounds passing close overhead. Someone was screaming for a medic. The sound cut through everything else, pure and terrible. "First squad's got a man down," a squad leader shouted. Bartlett's chest tightened. "Who?" "Wilson. He's hit bad." Private First Class David Wilson, 18 years old, from Michigan. Been in country maybe 6 weeks. Bartlett had talked with him just that morning about rotation dates and whether the Detroit Tigers would make the playoffs. "Doc's with him," the squad leader called back. The platoon medic, a Navy corpsman everyone called Harvey, was already working on Wilson. Through the trees, Bartlett could see Harvey cutting away the blood-soaked fatigue shirt, hands moving fast. The enemy fire was slacking off. Either they were withdrawing or repositioning. Bartlett made a decision. First squad, hold position and provide security. Second and third squads, assault through. His men surged forward with a roar. This was the moment, the crucial seconds where you closed with the enemy and ended it. They crashed through the undergrowth, firing, advancing, overwhelming the enemy position with speed and violence. Bartlett followed the assault, weapon up. They found the enemy position, 3 hasty fighting holes, empty shell casings scattered around, blood trails leading west into the jungle. The NVA had broken contact and fled. "Secure the area," Bartlett ordered. "Get a count. Ammo check. Casualty report now." His squad leaders moved fast. The men formed a defensive perimeter. Miller was already on the radio, relaying information to company. Harvey appeared at Bartlett's elbow. His hands were covered in blood. "Wilson?" Bartlett asked, though he already knew from Harvey's face. "He's gone, sir. Took a round through the chest. I tried, but..." Harvey's voice caught. "He was dead before I got to him." The jungle suddenly felt very quiet, despite the sounds of soldiers moving through brush, despite the radio chatter, despite everything. Wilson was dead. Bartlett's first KIA, the first man he'd lost under his command. Not lost, killed. There was a difference, and the words mattered. "Where is he?" Bartlett asked. Harvey led him back. Wilson lay on his back, fatigue shirt cut away, his young face slack and peaceful, like he'd simply fallen asleep. The wound in his chest was surprisingly small, just a dark hole, but the ground beneath him was soaked with blood. Bartlett knelt beside the body. He'd been trained for this moment at Infantry Officer Basic at Ranger School. They'd taught him the procedures, the radio calls, the paperwork. What they hadn't taught him was what to feel. He felt nothing. That was the worst part. Just a strange numbness, like watching himself from outside his body. This dead soldier was his responsibility. He'd led Wilson into this jungle. He'd given the orders that put First Squad on point, that placed Wilson in the exact position where a North Vietnamese bullet found him. "Sir," Miller's voice behind him. "Company wants to know if we need a dust-off, a medevac helicopter." But Wilson was beyond help. "Tell them, KIA," Bartlett said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, flat, mechanical. "Tell them we need extraction for remains." He reached out and closed Wilson's eyes. The kid's dog tags were still around his neck, metal warm from body heat that was already fading. David Wilson, O positive, Protestant, a whole life reduced to stamped aluminum. The rest of the platoon was watching. Bartlett could feel their eyes. What he did now, how he reacted, would set the tone for everything that followed. He was 22 years old, and he had no idea what he was doing, but he couldn't show that. A platoon leader never shows doubt. Bartlett stood. Second squad, establish security north and south. Third squad, secure the LZ. First squad, police up brass and prep Wilson for extraction. I want weapons tight, eyes open. The dinks could still be in the area. His men moved to obey. The machine of infantry operations continued. It had to. Standing still in the jungle meant dying. Patterson, the FO, appeared beside him. "You okay, Robin?" It was the first time anyone had used his first name since the firefight started. Officers didn't do that, not on mission. The question made it real somehow. Broke through the numbness. "Yeah," Bartlett lied. "I'm fine." "First time's the hardest," Patterson said quietly. "Doesn't get easier, just gets different." 20 minutes later, a Huey came in low and fast, touched down just long enough for 4 men to load Wilson's body wrapped in a poncho. Then it was gone. Rotor noise fading into the distance, carrying David Wilson home. First Platoon spent the rest of the day humping through the jungle, finding nothing. No more enemy contact, just endless green and heat and the weight of rifles and gear and what had happened. That night they set up their defensive perimeter in a small clearing. Bartlett sat with his back against a tree, cleaning his weapon by moonlight. Miller squatted nearby, maintaining the radio. Around them, the men talked in low voices, sharing cigarettes, heating C rations, checking weapons and gear. They didn't talk about Wilson, not yet. That would come later, in the way soldiers always talked about their dead, with dark humor and stories and the fierce determination to remember. Bartlett pulled out a small notebook and a pen. He'd started writing letters home to his parents, to friends, trying to explain what this war was like. But how do you explain this? How do you write about watching an 18-year-old kid bleed out in the jungle because you gave an order that put him in the path of a bullet? He wrote anyway, short sentences, matter of fact, describing the mission, the contact, the casualty, not mentioning the numbness or the doubt or the crushing weight of command. His parents didn't need to know that. Nobody back in the world needed to know that. What they needed to know was that their son was doing his job, that his men were good soldiers, that despite everything, the mission continued. Miller looked over. "Letter home, sir?" "Yeah, what do you say?" Bartlett stared at the page. "I tell them we made contact. 1 KIA. Mission accomplished. That's it?" "That's it?" Miller nodded slowly. "Guess there's not much else to say." But there was so much more, about the weight of command at 22, about the impossible burden of leading men who trusted you to keep them alive when you had no idea what you were doing, about the kid from Michigan who'd never see another baseball game, about the numbness that felt worse than grief. Bartlett closed the notebook. Those things stayed inside. Those things lived in the space between heartbeats and in the silence before sleep. Those things would follow him home eventually, though he didn't know that yet. He wouldn't understand for years what this first worst day had taken from him, what it had planted inside him that would grow into nightmares and anger and a distance from the world that never quite closed. This was May 1968. He had 7 more months as First Platoon's leader ahead of him, more than 60 helicopter combat assaults, more firefights, more men wounded and killed, more impossible decisions made by a 22-year-old who'd volunteered for all of it. But this day, this first KIA, this moment of standing over David Wilson's body in the jungle, this would stay with him forever. Not the worst day he'd experienced in Vietnam, but the first worst day. The day he learned that platoon leaders don't just give orders, they live with the consequences. Around him, First Platoon settled into the defensive perimeter. Claymore mines facing out, trip flares set, guard rotation established. The familiar routine of survival in a hostile land. They'd wake before dawn, saddle up, and move out on the next mission. Because that's what infantry does. That's what grunts do. They carry the weight. They do the job, and they drive on. Bartlett sat in the darkness, listening to the jungle sounds, feeling the weight of 27 lives that depended on his decisions. Tomorrow would bring another mission. More jungle, more uncertainty, maybe another Wilson. He checked his weapon one more time, pulled his bush hat low, and tried to sleep. In Vietnam, sleep never came easy, and when it did, it brought dreams of 18-year-old soldiers from Michigan who'd never go home.